Attacks by foreigners on the security services continue. Immigrants throw stones, branches and bottles. In short, anything within their reach. A few days ago, a Polish border guard officer was injured in the vicinity of Przemysl. A similar situation also took place in July. It is impossible not to mention the late Sergeant Mateusz Sitko, who gave his life defending the border last year. The situation changed in 2021. At that time, Donald Tusk said, "These are poor people who are looking for their place on earth." Donald Tusk is now contradicting himself on this issue. There are groups of people organized by Lukashenko and Putin, whose task is to physically attack the Polish and European borders. Very interesting words, which shows that it is immigration and the problems associated with it that are blowing up political parties and social systems from within. And indeed, the migration crisis has engulfed Europe, and societies are protesting against the mass influx of foreigners. And indeed, the migration crisis has engulfed Europe, and societies are protesting against the mass influx of foreigners. It is in the heart of the European Union, in Brussels, that regulations are being formulated governing the conditions under which migrants will be distributed as part of compulsory solidarity. This has been carefully hushed up.
Europe's full solidarity with Poland as a frontline state.
The European Commission is pursuing a superficial migration policy because, on the one hand, it ensures the protection of the European Union's external border, but on the other hand, it does nothing about the fact that migrants continue to enter EU member states. The solidarity mentioned by Ursula von der Leyen was trampled on when millions of refugees fled war torn Ukraine. Today, 1.5 million of them live in Poland, and although Poles have shown support for their neighbours, the migration blackmail continues. We hear bitter words from the mouths of Eurocrats. The Migration and Asylum Pact is binding on all European Union countries, and if a member state risks delaying the implementation of the provisions or even undermining the pact, the European Commission will have to take necessary measures. We are talking about financial penalties. Donald Tusk, who as President of the European Council threatened exactly the same thing, should understand this perfectly well. If the Polish government, as one or of 2 or 3 countries in Europe, decides not to participate in this solidarity-based distribution of responsibilities in the refugee issue, it may not have the right to do so, because we are talking about European law, but it does have certain arguments, and I am able to understand them, but this will inevitably have certain consequences. The visit of the President of the European Commission to the Eastern Border of the European Union was therefore aimed not so much at providing real support in the fight against migration, as at repairing the image of a government in decline. Similar problems are also plaguing EU institutions, which are enjoying ever-dwindling levels of trust. Bureaucrats speak the language of the right wing for fear of losing power. However, their words often do not match their actions. Donald Tusk is also dressing himself up as a conservative. Today, he claims that investments in security are important. The problem is that he wants to find the money in a leaky budget. Although the goal is justified, it will be achieved at the cost of growing debt. Next year, we will invest 200 billion zloty towards the defence industry and the Polish army. Prime Minister Donald Tusk has already accustomed us to the fact that what he says today may be outdated tomorrow. Here is another example. Now he is flexing his muscles in the front of a wall whose construction he criticised. The wall will not be built, neither in a year nor in 3 years. You will not see this wall. No one will see it. They don't actually want to build a wall. At the time, other politicians from Civic Coalition also took part in this festival of hypocrisy. Let these people into Poland at last. Who they are will be determined later. What are your services for? Both Donald Tusk and Ursula von der Leyen wanted to capitalise politically on the border. There was talk of investment in security. But these also turned out to be a big disappointment. Germany will benefit most from the EU project. We will go into debt to buy equipment, mainly from German and French companies. This equipment may actually arrive in 50 years' time, because factories need to be built, but we will simply pay through the nose for it. There are no prospects for financial support in the EU budget for next year either. Disbursements, including the most important ones, for example for agricultural local governments, will depend on the will of the Brussels commissioners. On the one hand, the EU demands solidarity and financial commitment, but in return offers little. Security issues seen from Brussels appear quite different from those seen at the border of the EU. The question is when EU solidarity will be understood literally, and whether it will then be too late. Yesterday, a Russian attack disrupted Ursula von der Leyen's flight. The jet lost access to its electronic navigation systems and had to make an emergency landing.